welcome back to the program and our book talk segment today, I should say. Great to welcome a woman who's written a very interesting and hopefully helpful book as well. It is called Dopamine, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. We're joined today by Dr. Anna Lembke, and she is the medical director of Stanford Addiction Medicine. And really the book kind of goes into some new scientific discoveries explaining why there is a relentless pursuit of pleasure can lead to pain. And she talks about some true stories of her patients falling prey to addiction and then finding the way out again. We're going to find out about it right now as Dr. Anna Lembke joined us by telephone. Doctor, good to talk with you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, good to have a chance to chat with you for a few minutes, an opportunity to read through the book. And I like what you did. I think you've taken real life people. Obviously, you changed the names to kind of protect anonymity, but their stories, and some of them are they're all very interesting, but kind of shocking what people are going through, isn't it?
Yeah, from my perspective, having seen patients for more than 20 years, I'm not as shocked by it as I used to be,
right,
or as that other people are. But I do appreciate that it's shocking for the average reader. Yes,
I think just more the angst of what people are going through. Maybe that's a better term I should use. And you don't know that all the time. You talk to different people or see people, you don't really know what they're going through mentally or in their private homes, but people are going through some difficult things with addictions, right? Primarily addictions.
That's very true. It's very hard to see from the outside who is struggling with severe addictions. And, it's often the person in your classroom, the colleague at work, your boss, lots of wonderful people in the world struggling with this problem. And of course, the problem is growing, not just addictions to drugs and alcohol, but also addictions to behaviors like pornography, compulsive gambling, shopping, video games, social media. So lots of pain out there.
I guess the last 10, 15, 20 years, and you talk about it in the book, obviously, drugs, alcohol, I mean, that's been around for, since the beginning of time, but new things to people to be addicted to. And just a couple you mentioned right there, pornography, which is much more available, obviously, with the internet, gambling now, online gambling, and you see it all over the place with the sports gambling. That's much easier for people to do it now.
Yeah.
In the old days, you had to, find a bookie or whatever. You had to go to Vegas or, maybe one or two places. Now it's much easier, right?
That's right. One of the biggest risk factors for addiction is simple access to that drug. And today we have, nearly ubiquitous access to all kinds of reinforcing drugs and behaviors. And I would just echo that pornography in particular has really become a silent scourge with more and more people, especially young men, getting addicted to pornography and really suffering in isolation and silence. Fortunately, there are some online, here's a good thing about the internet, some online communities where people are getting together and helping each other with this very shameful addiction, which is good news.
Yeah, not to say the internet is bad. I mean, there's good and bad and everything, but right, you're right about that. There's help available.
That's right.
And your book is one of those things in print form, which we're happy to have today. And it's Dopamine, the title of the book, the Dopamine Nation. That's the part of the brain or the chemical in the brain that these addictions stimulate the most, right? Am I right about that?
That's right. So dopamine is a chemical that is made in our brain and in our bodies. It is fundamental to the experience of pleasure, reward, and motivation. It's probably even more important for motivation, that is the work that we're willing to do to get the reward, than it is for the experience of pleasure itself. For example, scientists have engineered a rat to have no dopamine and found that when they do that, if they put food in the rat's mouth, the rat will eat the food and seem to get pleasure from the food. But if they put the food even a body length away, the rat will starve to death. It can't be bothered to get up and move toward the food. So that was one of the indicators that dopamine is really, really important for motivation or the work to go get the reward.
It's a necessary, obviously, chemical God put in our brains. You need it, but when it's addicted or you're putting things into that brain that are not good, that chemical, I guess, can be hurt you, right? I mean, it doesn't know the difference at the beginning. Am I right about I didn't explain it very well, but is that what happens?
Yeah. So essentially, what happens is that pleasure and pain are co-located in the brain and work like opposite sides of a balance. So when we experience pleasure, we release dopamine in the part of our brain called the reward pathway. But one of the rules governing that balance is it wants to remain level, and it will work very hard to restore a level balance. And it does that by tipping the brain an equal and opposite amount to the side of pain. That's the come down, the after effect, the hangover. And I like to imagine that as these little gremlins hopping on the pain side of the balance to bring it level again, but they like it on the balance, so they stay on until it's tipped an equal and opposite amount before hopping off and restoring a level balance. So as the brain becomes addicted, what happens is with repeated exposure to all different kinds of pleasurable stimuli, all that dopamine eventually means that more and more gremlins hop on the pain side of the balance to try to restore homeostasis, and eventually they're camped out there, tents and barbecues in tow, and they don't leave. So then we end up in a dopamine deficit state, which means that we have to use our drug not to get high, but just to feel normal.
Right.
And when we're not using our drug, we've got those gremlins living on the pain side, and we're experiencing the universal symptoms of withdrawal from any addictive substance, which are anxiety, irritability, insomnia, depression, and craving.
Yeah, it's a difficult, obviously difficult thing for people to shake, any kind of addiction. But you talk about in the book several solutions that you've dealt with your patients, including dopamine fasting. Can you explain that briefly, what that is?
Yeah, so that means to just abstain from our drug of choice for long enough for those neuroadaptation gremlins to hop off the pain side of the balance and for a level balance to be restored. What that essentially means is that when we initially abstain from using our drug, our balance tips to the side of pain, we go into withdrawal, a dopamine deficit state. But if we wait long enough, our body and brain will eventually get the signal that they need to start making more dopamine again. They will reopen their dopamine factories and eventually get dopamine levels back up to normal baseline. And when that happens, then we're not any longer tipped to the side of pain. We're not in this constant place of craving with intrusive thoughts of wanting to use. We're able to look around us and enjoy more modest rewards, which we lose the ability to do when that balance is tipped to the side of pain.
Right.
And then we can also look back at true cause and effect and sort of reevaluate our drug use and say, gee, do I really want to continue to use? And if I do I want to continue to use in that way? So the book also talks about, how to moderate. So some people's goal is abstinence, but some people want to go back to using in moderation. It is much easier to go from using a lot to using none and then going back to moderation than it is to go from using a lot to using in moderation. And that's because that period of abstinence is just crucial for resetting reward pathways, upregulating dopamine, and getting to a balanced level before we re-enter trying to use in moderation.
Yeah, difficult no matter what situation the addiction is in. You're going to have to go through some kind of pain to get back to normal, right? No matter what.
That's right. That's a key, and I always warn my patients it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it's worth it because at the end of this dopamine fast, and I usually recommend 30 days because that's the minimum amount of time it takes to reset reward thresholds, but at 30 days, it really will be worth it. It's a project worth doing, although it's really hard.
I know we have limited time, so I want to give out the title once again, Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. And Dr. Anna Lembke has been our guest. Doctor, you want to give out your website? People can get more information about you or the book?
Well, there's a website for the book, dopaminenation.com or annalemke.com.
Great. Doctor, pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us. Keep up the great work. Hopefully we can talk to you again down the road.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.